Hey, Mason here. So I'm currently playing an Archmage Hierophant in SSF, and because my gear is very limited, I decided to, instead of spending time grinding, I would spend time doing maths and figuring out which skill I should play. So the main three skills that I played on Archmage Hierophant are Bolt Lightning of Orbiting, Ice Nova of Frostbolts with Katava's Thirst, or Vortex of Projection with the self-cast Frostbolts. In this video, I'll cover how each skill works, the pros and cons for each of them, and how to min-max Vortex of Projection mathematically. So here I've put together 3 clips of my character with the same gear and the same ones and the same damage stats with these 3 different skills. You'll see a short comparison on their DPS, and that will lead into the next section of this video. So what's the TLDR? Which has the best damage? Vortex of Projection, followed by Ice Nova of Frostbolts, followed by Bolt Lightning of Orbiting. And by how much? Vortex of Projection is probably 50 to 100% more damage, so 1.5x to 2x, and Ice Nova of Frostbolts is somewhere in between. If you are in Trade League or you have Divines, you want to play Ice Nova of Frostbolts for quality of life, and spend your Divines for damage. If you want to see your screen, you want to play either Bolt Lightning or Ice Nova, because Vortex of Projection has terrible screen clarity. And if you need damage and you don't mind a 2-button build, play Vortex of Projection. Is that video fair? Not really, because Katava's Thirst was not aiming at the brain for maximum damage for Ice Nova of Frostbolts, but for Bolt Lightning and Vortex, it is a fair comparison. However, I did test further, and Ice Nova of Frostbolts ended up being around in between, just because of how it's been nerfed and how the damage numbers are on it. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so going through Bolt Lightning of Orbiting. The pros: it's a 1-button build. You hold your button and you spin. It's very easy to play. It doesn't flashbang you, cover your screen or cover ground effects, so HC friendly. And it also has a relatively low mana consumption, which is very good on bad gear, and it means that you can occasionally drop inspiration depending on your setup. The cons are that it's the lowest DPS out of the 3 options. It's also melee, which means that you need to cast so you're stationary, which means you might just fall over or explode to ranged mobs if your gear is bad, or if you're doing Big Boom Expedition, which I was doing. It also has very limited range. The balls don't go out very far when you're using slower projectiles, and it's not the greatest at breach because of this, since the ranged mobs can hit the person that you're defending while you're trying to defend her. So now we're going to cover Frostbolts. Frostbolts is a skill that Vortex of Projection and Ice Nova of Frostbolts interact with for more damage, so they get 50% more damage when cast on a Frostbolt. It's a blue ball and it travels at what I believe is 3.75 meters per second, and you don't really care about the skill except how many are spawned when you cast it, so the projectile count, how fast it moves, because the AoEs project from the actual Frostbolt itself as it's moving. So this only is really applicable for Vortex and Ice Nova. So, I'm going to go through Ice Nova of Frostbolts first. You've probably seen this skill before because Spicy Sushi has a guide on it, but the pros are that it's a 1-button build with Katava's Thirst, the damage is better than Bolt Lightning, and the clear and the quality of life is also better as well. You're ranged, and you have some AoE. The cons are that it has an insane mana consumption compared to the other 2. You will need to use a mana flask, and it's likely that you won't be able to even sustain it with just inspiration. At least I was having trouble with this in SSF. You also sacrifice a helmet slot for Katava's Thirst, which means you have less suppression. And the Frostbolt auto-targeting can be very goofy if your cast speed is not high enough, which you actually saw in the clip earlier. This makes it feel really bad with low cast speed, so if you have no cast speed on Ring or no cast speed on Amulet, or you're using a unique Amulet and you just have no cast speed because you're playing SSF, or your gear is poor, your gear is low because you're poor, it can be difficult and it can feel inconsistent. At least I had this issue when I tried it on Maven a few times. So now I'm going to go over the bulk of the video, which is what I'm playing. It's Vortex of Projection, and this was nerfed in 3.27. So the pros are that it has the best damage output because the numbers are good, and it also, repeats 5 times per singular cast. It also has the best coverage. The AoE is bigger than Ice Nova or Frostbolts, and it technically has the best DPS on a lower budget or limited gear, at least in my personal testing, and arguably on a high budget as well if you don't mind a 2-button playstyle. The cons are that it has the best flashbang capacity. The best flashbang capability. You cannot see anything on your screen. It's also the best at covering ground effects, so you can randomly die from ground explosions. And it's a 2-button build, which some people don't like. So how does Vortex actually work? You click Vortex, it pulses up to 5 Frostbolts, one after another. So it will pulse 5 times, and if there's 5 Frostbolts, it will pulse at each one, with the 0.4 second between pulse. I do not believe this time window between pulse is changeable. Each pulse explodes the Frostbolt, destroys it, and if you have returning projectile, you can't actually cast Vortex on the ones that are returning, as they've already been exploded. So the main thing here is, how was Vortex nerfed? In 3.26, Waggle has a clip here, and I'm just going to show you what it looks like. So here's the Vortex projection clip. I'll just play it.
So what happens with Spell Echo? If I'm understanding what the wiki says correctly, and it is correct, even though there's only 5 Frostbolts, and I'm gonna cast Vortex twice because of Spell Echo, I should actually get 9 stacks of poison, because it should actually give 9 explosions.
Okay, thank you, Waggle, for the clip. Basically, what he tested is that Vortex of Projection was able to explode from Frostbolts, even though those Frostbolts were going to explode from other Vortexes of Projection. And so when you shoot out 5 Frostbolts with Greater Volley, you get 9 hits. You get 5 hits for the first cast of Vortex, and then 4 hits, because the first Frostbolt is gone, 4 hits with the Spell Echo of Vortex. That's why 9 hits. But now, it only hits 5 times, which is intended, because they nerfed this, right? They nerfed this in 3.27, which means you need more Frostbolts, and that's a limiting factor for your DPS. So with that in mind, I'm going to now hop into game and show you this. This is my character. Before I go through everything, this is my character here. My character has Vortex of Projection, level 1, Chance to Poison, level 1, for low amounts of flat chaos, and Spell Echo. It also has Frostbolts with Unleash, Greater Volley. But in my case, I'll show you the example without Unleash and without Greater Multi-Projectile. My character has a Replicate Alberons, so it can't deal non-chaos damage, which means Frostbolt can't proc any damage on the boss. And it also has the ring called... Sorry, not the ring. This guy, the Golden Rule, which makes it so that a poison is inflicted on my character every time it hits. And the other slots are ones with Chance to Poison, to get to 100% poison chance. Which I'm not sure if I can show that. But let's see if it is. Yeah, it says right here, 100% chance to poison. So what does this look like? When I cast Frostbolts on this guy, you see nothing happens. There's no poison, there's no damage. If I cast Frostbolts, and then I cast Vortex, you can see that there's 4 hits right there. So I'm going to take out Spell Echo. I'm going to cast Frostbolts and Vortex. You can see there's 4 hits. There's 5 hits, but the first one missed. If I put in Spell Echo, let's see if that changes. There's actually less hits now, because obviously the overlaps are not perfect. But you can see here, 4 hits. It hasn't changed. So this interaction that Waggle has shown has been nerfed as of this patch. Alright, so what does that mean for us? How many Frostbolts do we need? Because previously, just gonna hop back a slide. Because previously, you could have 9 hits for 5 Frostbolts. Now you must have 1-to-1. You must have 5 hits for 5 Frostbolts. So if you want 9 hits, you need 9 Frostbolts. And that's your limiting factor for your DPS in this patch with this change. So with that in mind, how many do we need? With just Greater Volley, it's 5 hits, so 5 projectiles. If you have Greater Volley and Volley, that's 7 hits. If you have Greater Volley and Greater Multi-Proj, that's 9 hits. This 9 hits is the same as having Spell Echo on Vortex in the last patch for 9 hits, with only just Greater Volley Frostbolts, so 5 projectiles. Just keep in mind that Unleash Seals acts as a direct multiplier on the number of projectiles, and each Vortex cast consumes 10 Frostbolts, because you get 5 per cast, and you get Spell Echo, which doubles it, so 10 per cast. As a general idea, you want to cast more Vortexes than Frostbolts, because Vortex is your damage, and Frostbolts is kind of the consuming resource. And you want to have as many projectiles per cast of Frostbolts, so you cast it less often, which means you cast Vortex more. The best breakpoint I found was Greater Volley with GMP, Greater Multi-Proj, for 9 projectiles. And when you have 3 stacks of Unleash, that is 4 times casts, which then results in 9 times 4 being 32 projectiles, which is 3 casts of Vortex with Spell Echo, since it's 5 Frostbolts per cast, plus Spell Echo, that's 10 per cast, and then 10 times 3, because 3 casts, that's 30 Frostbolts, which means that your 30 Frostbolts gets consumed every 3 casts, and you have 2 overflowed Frostbolts. Let me hop into game and show you that right now. Alright, so now we're back in game. I'm going to put in the supports. We got Frostbolts, we got GMP, and we got Unleash. In my main links, I have Vortex, Poison, and Spell Echo. So look what happens here. I'm going to cast my Frostbolts, and then I'm going to cast my Vortex. Let's see how many hits we get. Looks like we only got around 9 hits. Let's try it again. 7 hits this time. 8 hits this time. So with this setup, you're actually not getting anywhere near 30 hits. And that's because I'm only casting Vortex once. Let me cast it 3 times in quick succession. It's much better now at 14 hits. 15 hits. 15 hits. So it looks like we're getting around 10 to 20 hits, with around 15 being the cap with this setup. And before I hop back into the slides, I just want to talk about how you can actually test whether your Frostbolts are proccing. So the easiest way to do this is when you cast without a Frostbolt, you cast around your character. So throw your Frostbolt out, move away, and then cast on it. As soon as you see casts around your character, that means you've run out of Frostbolts to consume, and the casts are being on your character. So in my case, it should be when I click Vortex 4 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then one more time. Then the 5th time, looks like it will proc on me. See right there, they procced on me. So generally it's around, you can test, you can kind of get a gauge of how long you can cast. So in my case, I'll be like this, and then I'll cast my next Frostbolt. So I don't cast around me, and I cast around my Frostbolts instead for maximum damage. But that's how you gauge this and how you test this yourself. Alright, so in the previous demos, I showed that you only get 15 hits from this, even though mathematically you would get way more hits. So this is why we need to care about projectile speed. This is only applicable for Vortex of Projection, because for Ice Nova, you just spam on the boss, like you spam your Novas on the boss, and the Katava's Thirst will generate new Frostbolts on the boss, so that you can just basically have 100% uptime on your damage. If you are self-casting Frostbolts for Ice Nova, you just want to play Vortex instead. There's no point, really. So in this picture here, the character is this black dot right here, and each one of these dots from left to right, from right to left, is each Frostbolt being procced by Ice Nova. So I'm not sure if my mouse is being shown. Let me see if I can make that show. Okay, so player is here. This will be the first. You shoot at your Frostbolts from right to left. Then over here you get 1 pulse, 2 pulse, 3 pulse, 4 pulse, 5 pulse. That's how you read this. So in this case, it is 1.5 meters between snapshots for Frostbolt, because you get the meters per second of Frostbolt, which is 3.75 on the POE wiki. Then you times it by the seconds between each pulse, so 0.4 seconds, which results in the distance between each pulse, which is 1.5. So what does this look like if we have no slower proj speed? Your maximum range for damage is between 3.7 to 5.3. So let me explain this. We're starting at A over here. We're shooting my Frostbolts from left to right. At each interval, you see here, C, D, E, F, and G. That is each pop of Vortex, basically each pulse. At each pulse, I've drawn a circle with a radius of 3.8 meters, which is based on my character's radius, which is on Hierophant. In that case, that is Sanctuary of Thought with 5,000 mana, and Vortex of Projection being cast on a Frostbolt, which gives it 50% more AoE. So at this point, you see, you're starting here, you shoot your Frostbolt from left to right. At C, you have an AoE. At D, you have an AoE. At E, you have an AoE, etc. You have a circle at F and a circle at G. And now we look for the overlap for 5 hits. In that case, that would be this part right here, where all of them, basically the Venn diagram, kind of all, it's all union here. So in this case, I looked at these values here. You get around 3.7. These are around approximations, and 5.3. So we take a 3.7 meters and 5.3 meters, and then minus them together, 1.6 approximate range for maximum pulses. That means you need to stand at this perfect window between 3.7 meters and 5.3 meters, where the boss is in this window here, to get 5 hits on Vortex of Projection. Alright, so what does this look like in game? I've got my character here with Frostbolts and just Volley, with no spell echo in my Vortex of Projection. And let's see if I can try and get 5 hits on this guy who's standing still. So I got 4 hits there. I got 3 hits there. I got 4 hits there. I got 4 hits again. Why am I not getting 5 hits? And here's kind of the issue with this kind of calculations. Every single circle originates on the same line in this graph. However, Frostbolts does not actually all sit on the same exact point. It's spread in a line that is perpendicular to where you're going. And I'll show you this in a picture in a second. But first, I just want to talk about what happens if you do use slower proj speed. When you put in slow approach speed, you lower the speed by around 30%, which then means that between each pulse, the distance is around 1.05 meters. So your max pulse range opens up to 1.5 to 4.8, and that's 3.3 meters, which is approximately double of what it is without slow approach. So you can see here in the graph here, I've basically done the same thing. We start at A, the first pulse is at C, the second pulse is at D, E, F, and G. And then the overlap is much larger. If we compare this overlap to this overlap, it's basically more than double, slightly more than double. So with that in mind, slower projectile speed makes your consistency for hitting 5 hits on a target way, way, way better. And it's generally recommended to put onto Frostbolts when you're playing Vortex of Projection. So let's now look at that in game. Again, I want to now put in slow approach into my Frostbolts. And again, I don't have spell echo and I only have just greater volley, and see if I can hit 5 hits. See here, I got 5 hits. Again, I got 5 hits. Again, I got 5 hits. I did 3 casts, I got 5 hits for every cast. It makes it a lot more consistent. Alright, and here's where I mentioned what I just mentioned before. The Frostbolts aren't perfectly on the same line. You see here on this picture here, I'm casting off to the left, but my Frostbolts are horizontal. And over here, I'm casting off to the right, but my Frostbolts are, again, vertical. Sorry, not horizontal, perpendicular. So in this case, what the graph actually looks like is something like this. The main issue is we don't know how far, like we don't know the exact value of how far the Frostbolts are spread, which means that it's very hard to get an accurate measurement of which distance to which distance that the Frostbolts will all converge on. So in this case, it's this weird looking shape right here. But just as a general note, the practical values that I showed before, the ranges where the Frostbolts will hit 5 hits will be smaller. That's basically how you can interpret this in a simple way. So generally, slow approach is still better because it improves your consistency with hitting 5 hits with Frostbolt, which compared to 4 hits is basically 25% more damage because you're getting an extra hit with your Frostbolt, with your Vortex from 1 cast of Frostbolts. Okay, so I already showed this demo, and now we're going to talk a little bit about getting AoE on Vortex. It's generally not recommended, at least from what I've seen, because it's difficult to get more AoE. Hierophant already gives you 100% increased AoE, which means if you get, again, like 20% increased AoE, you're actually only getting 10% more from what you are currently because you already have diminishing returns. And Vortex itself has a 50% more AoE multiplier. So when you cast it on a Frostbolt, which makes it really hard to get more AoE on because you have both more and both increased already, just built into Hierophant and Vortex. The end result is that this actually makes Vortex pretty hard to play on other ascendancies because you really need this AoE. You really need this 100% increased AoE to help you with getting these overlaps. So TLDR, not worth bothering with, just slow down the projectiles of Frostbolts instead. Okay, so here, the summary of this section, the TLDR, without slow approach, it's basically impossible to get 5 hits per Vortex consistently, as I showed you, and I couldn't get any of them to hit 5 times, but just the slowing component of slower projectile support is probably estimated as 25% more damage because you're getting 5 hits instead of 4 hits with Vortex of Projection. And you put this link on your Frostbolt skill. So it doesn't actually use up a support in your Vortex of Projection itself, which means that you can give free damage to your Vortex of Projection with the support on another gem, right? So it's basically a no-brainer to put onto your Frostbolts. I haven't mathematically checked Intensify support. Intensify support increases your AoE, but it gives you less AoE. So it's not like, it's multiplicative less AoE when you cast consistently. But just eyeballing it and based on the maths I showed you on the previous slides, it's probably a DPS loss. Also, from my personal use, it makes the coverage kind of ass for mapping, so I don't really like it. So TLDR, put slower projectiles on Frostbolt for maximizing single target DPS, and it's generally a 25% more damage multiplier. Okay, so now we get to the actual video game part, min-maxing Vortex of Projectile. The best way to min-max this is to get Frostbolts, greater volley, greater multi-proj. So this makes it so that you can have 9 bolts per cast, and with Unleash, that's 32. And you want to put this in your glove slots. The reason why is because Shaper mods. There are 2 Shaper mods. One is slower projectile, which is perfect. The other one is faster casting, which is also perfect. So the absolute min-max possible gloves will be this. Life, mana, or it could be whatever prefixes you want, like evasion ES ones. And then you want a prefix for the Shaper mod. Then you want a suffix for spell suppression, a suffix for any res or chaos res. And then you want the other suffix for the faster casting shaper mod. I do not know how you craft these. They look disgustingly hard to craft. Here's what I personally recommend. These are my SSF gloves that I just got today. They have life, they have rarity, don't care about this line. They have slow approach, but it's level 16. They have suppression, they have regen, which is a dead mod basically. They have some dex, which is nice to have on Hierophant. You need the dex. The way you craft this, very easy. I had a pair of gloves with life, rarity, and triple suffix, all full. And then I just hit it with a Shaper Orb. Over here you can see that the chance to hit the one you want is a 75% chance. And if you want to hit tier 1, technically that's a 1 in 4. But it's a 3 in 4 to just hit slow approach, which is the main thing that actually matters. So that's how you make cheap gloves. This is the absolute min-max gloves. I don't know how to craft these, so you have to look up these yourself on Craft of Exile. But for these ones, just get full suffixes and hit it with the Shaper Orb and pray to win the 3 in 4. Okay, so what about Arcanist Brand instead of Unleash? Two things I'm going to compare right now. The first thing I want to show is what does it look like with greater projectiles and GMP. So in this case, it will be these two here. Greater Volley, Greater Multi-Proj, and Unleash. I did not show this previously. And this is with Spell Echo. I just wanted to show you how many hits we get with one cast. So I'm just going to hold my Vortex key until all the orbs explode. You can see I got like 26 hits. I'm going to do it again. Reminder, this is with slow projectiles. I got 30 hits. Now what happens if I take out slow projectiles? I got 19 hits. So again, slow projectiles is pretty important. But I wanted to show you that in one cast of Frostbolts with 3 Unleash stacks, and then I hold my Vortex for 3 casts, I get around 30 Vortex hits on this boss. Now with Arcanist Brand here, I'm going to put in Arcanist Brand instead of Unleash. I'm going to keep in slow projectiles. I'm going to keep in all the other ones. I'm going to place my Arcanist Brand and just spam my Vortex projection, and we'll see how this one goes. So you can see that I don't want to damage this guy too much in case he dies. But again, I'll show another showcase and just look at that number in the top left. You can see that it only really caps at around 20 before going back down. So in this case, I don't really think Arcanist Brand is that good, simply because you might as well just self-cast, right? You have to press Arcanist Brand, you're casting it, and you have to cast it once every few seconds. So you might as well just self-cast your Vortex to get like a bit more damage. In this case, like nearly 28. But hopefully that gives a good demonstration of why I don't really recommend Arcanist Brand, and you might as well just self-cast Vortex of Projection. Okay, so again, I think it's bad, just self-cast it. You also probably need to use Runebinder to maximize Frostbolt output, since you don't really have Unleash tripling your Frostbolt projectile count. So just keep that in mind if you do want to try Arcanist Brand, or if you do like the quality of life from Arcanist Brand. Okay, so the most important section, maximizing POB DPS. How do you actually POB this? I am not sure, but this is the setup that Waggle used in the last leak, and after my testing here, I think it's pretty reasonable. We have Vortex of Projection with 5 counts. You cast one, you get 5 hits, right? And then, personally, I just think you should just take off 10 to 20% damage, since you're casting your Frostbolt between the Vortexes. So in my case, 10% less damage is around 8.5 million damage. If I just leave it without the less damage, it's like 9.5. But how do you actually calculate the correct amount of DPS? So you want to get your Frostbolt cast time, your Vortex cast time, and you want to find the total cast time per cycle. What does this mean? Frostbolt cast time plus how many Vortexes do you cast? In my case, I'm casting Frostbolt once to get 32 projectiles, and then I'm casting Vortex, 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 3 Vortexes. In my case, that would be 1 Frostbolt and 3 Vortexes. So my numbers are 0.27 for the cast time on Frostbolt, plus 0.17, 0.17, 0.17 for my 3 Vortexes. That results in 0.78 seconds per cycle. So now we're going to continue. You want to go get your hit damage. In your hit damage, you can find that here in POB in the calculation tab on the Vortex of Projection. It says the skill average hit, which is 230k damage. My DPS, the way you calculate this in the end, is you get 30 hits per cycle. So that's 3 Vortexes with Spell Echo. Then you times the skill average hit damage, which is in this case 230k, and then you divide by the time per cycle. In my case, it's 0.78 seconds per cycle. So that would be 30 times skill hit damage divided by time per cycle, which is approximately 8.8 million DPS. So just save yourself the trouble and go right 10% less damage in your POB. And that's it. Thanks for watching. If you want to see any updates on my SSF character, like sub, etc., I just cleared 4 stones with it, so I've been taking it pretty easy. But I will make an update video soon. But I thought I'll make this as a separate video because it covers something that's not exactly related to my character, but rather some maths behind this skill in particular, and min-maxing this skill, and just stuff I thought was interesting on this skill. But yeah, this skill is terrible for looking at your screen. You cannot see what's going on. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it interesting. Hope you learned something. And yeah, if you want to see my SSF character, I'll make an update soon. Like and subscribe, etc. Cool. I'm out. Thanks for watching.